Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's Shannon Graham Cornell from Better Home Organizing. And today I'm here to talk about organizing our tax documents. So April 15th, almost here, right around the corner. I thought it would be good to talk about some suggestions for how to organize your tax documents. If you're not done with your taxes for this year, it's not too late to get them organized and get them taken care of. And of course, for next year, you'll have plenty of information so that you can plan ahead and stay organized all year long. I will start by saying I am not a tax professional. I am not giving tax advice in this case. I'm simply talking about organizing documents. So if you do have a tax professional that you work with and they have a different recommendation, particularly when it comes to how they want your documents categorized, by all means, do what they're asking you to do. But in absence of that information, or if they don't have a prescribed methodology they want you to use, here are some thoughts. So you won't be surprised when I tell you that the first thing I want you to do when you're thinking about organizing your tax documents is to pick a place. One place in your home where your tax documents are collected throughout the year. And it should be someplace that is centrally located, easily accessible. You want it to be really simple to just drop your documents in this spot without too much fuss. You also want to make sure that whatever this place is, that all of the adults in your household or anybody who's generating tax documentation knows about this place and knows the rule is that's where the tax documents go. So first step, pick a place. Second step is pick a container. So obviously your container is going to need to suit the place that you've chosen to store it, but you also need to consider how much paper do you generate as a household that is part of your tax backup. So choose a container that is appropriate for the amount. So, think about what you generated last year. Did you have a lot of paper? Did you have a little bit of paper? How complicated was it? One thing I'll also say about this, consider in your container that we often have documents that are electronically delivered to us in addition to the paper things that we might either receive in the mail or that we might generate because we got a paper receipt from a donation center where we dropped stuff off. If you've got a mix of digital and paper, hard copy documentation, I would recommend choosing a physical container. And if you've got digital, then digital copies of things, then print those out and put copies of them in your container that includes your other documentation, other paper documentation. And the reason for that is that way you don't have to try to remember what is where. You'll always have it electronically if you want it that way, of course, but this way all of your material is in one place. It's easier to print out electronic material and store it with your paper than it is to scan your paper and store it electronically. So I would recommend having a physical copy of all of your tax documentation as you're preparing your taxes. So when you get an email that's a receipt for something that you need to save for tax purposes, print it out and put it in your container in the place that you've decided on. And then the third piece that you should think about is your categories. Now, this may be where your tax professional will give you some advice. They may have categories they want you to use. So, obviously, again, do what they are telling you to do. But if you don't have that guidance, then some suggestions for categories could be the following. One for income. So anything that you get, either pay stubs or obviously your W-2s will arrive at some point, put those there. You might have another category for medical expenses that you want to keep track of if you're itemizing those. Taxes you've already paid during the year, you'll want to have a category for those. Donations. So either, receipts from items that you've taken to a donation center, or for cash gifts that you've given, you'll want to have a folder for that. And then you may also want to have, depending on, again, the complexity of your information, there may be other categories that you would want to have that are specific to you. So certainly, add those in as well. And you might want a catch-all folder, just for those one or two random pieces of paper that don't really fit into another category. You might have a miscellaneous or other category that you could keep. And then if it turns out that you have a lot of one type, you do that, you do this categorization this year, and it turns out you have a lot of one type of documentation, you can always next year or you add another folder that represents that category. But for this first go around, other or miscellaneous is fine for that catch-all stuff. So another thing to think about is you may consider, and this is actually what we do at our house, our documentation is pretty light during the course of the year. We just don't have a lot of complications in our tax documentation. So for us, we actually we don't categorize. We just do one folder per year. So during, when the new year starts, we start a new tax folder. So we created a new tax folder in January for 2019, and that's where we just drop everything that we collect over the course of the year. And then that folder then gets reused once taxes are filed for that year to hold that tax return and its supporting materials. So that's another way to go. I wouldn't recommend it if you have a lot of paper. For example, thinking about the income category, one recommendation that I actually think is a good one is that you keep copies of your pay stubs until you get your W-2 for the year. And then you can reconcile, you can just make sure that your W-2 matches what you got, over the course of the year. Well, if you're doing that, so you're printing out, let's say you get paid, every week. You could have 52 pieces of paper that you're putting in your tax folder. Even though you'll eventually replace it with a W-2, that's still a lot of paper you might want to have separated out from, your donation receipts. So, again, do what makes sense for you and the amount of paper you have and the number of categories you have. But the most important thing is make sure that you have a good place and a good container to hold it in. And I would even recommend, even if you decide that that one place is a drawer, I would still put it in some kind of a container, either a tray inside that drawer or in a folder or a series of folders if you're using categories, just so that it's very clear what is tax documentation and it doesn't get mixed up with other paper that might be in that drawer. So that is my advice. And again, not a tax professional. But some thoughts on how you can organize your documents. And again, if you do have a tax professional who is recommending a particular category system, by all means use that. But again, if you need some ideas, then there are some for you today. So good luck with your taxes. Hopefully you'll get them done in plenty of time, and your refund is enormous. And but other than that, I will see you tomorrow for our next time together. So have a great day, everybody. I will see you later. Bye.